Hello, good morning, good night, good afternoon to anyone listening to this anywhere in the world. I am sitting down at my desk right now and I'm just really excited and kind of anxious to get started on this new journey that I've been wanting to do for some time now, honestly. I kind of thought it would be too hard to get into a space like this, but then I remembered that literally anyone can do it. Anyone can just pick this up, I guess. And I figured if everyone else can do it, why not me? So it is with great joy and happiness and everything else that I say to you guys for the very first time, welcome to the Silent Sender podcast with your host, Delaney McSweeney. So I guess we'll just open up this first episode with a little bit of information about the podcast and how it came to fruition, how it came to me, all of that jazz. So I guess the first question that I would pose to myself is, what is this podcast? I created this podcast, Silent Sender, just as a vessel for athletes to get their stories out into the world on a podium, on a platform that is anonymous. I want athletes to have the opportunity to share their stories without fear of getting reprimanded, fears of losing a scholarship, being kicked off of a team, being suspended, all of that stuff. And I figured that I could be an all right voice for this. Maybe that's just me being too confident in myself, but too much confidence can't hurt, right? So why start the podcast now? Why do it now? Well, I have been a retired athlete for about a year now, and I've always just been someone that is super creative or kind of someone that's in need of an outlet. I need somewhere that I can talk and explain my thoughts, and I want to give everyone else the opportunity to do that, whether they want to do that anonymously or with a name and a face attached to it. That's besides the point. But yeah, I just wanted this to be a fun experience for everyone. I know there's other creators in the space that do this, but I kind of wanted to put myself into the space as well. Little competition never hurt anyone. So why me doing this podcast, I guess, is a good question. I always, when I was playing sports, I just wished that there was an outlet in this space. I felt like kind of crazy at times for thinking that every other athlete had it super easy or never had any poor experiences with their journey. And obviously, logically, I knew that wasn't the case, but I was never seeing any media put out of athletes telling their stories or talking about their experiences that they had in their own programs across all sports, all divisions, anywhere. So basically, I'm doing this for myself. I want to provide an experience for other people that are, whether they're in middle school basketball or Division I, like top ranked sports. I just want to be someone that a younger version of myself didn't have and a younger version of myself always wanted. So now I guess I'll cut to the chase and explain who I am. My name is Delaney. I said that earlier. I played Division I volleyball for 5 years. I spent 3 years at a university in North Carolina, and then I transferred and spent 2 years in my home state of Iowa. I'm born and raised in Iowa. I always lived in a small town up here, and it was amazing. I started playing volleyball when I was in middle school, played all throughout high school and in club. So I've been around the block a few times. So I think that's pretty much all you really want to or need to know about me for now. I've been online for a really long time as well, which I think gives me an interesting perspective here, as many of you guys have been as well, I'm sure. Also, something else that I think is worth noting is that when I was in college, I studied journalism and mass communications, strategic communications, English, all of that stuff. So I think that just kind of gives me the brain that I guess I need to do this. I have experience working in podcast space, media space, video format, photo format, all of that type of stuff. So I've just really been passionate about this for a super long time. And I just wanted to dip my foot into the space, put out some feelers, and see how it goes. All that being said, let's get started into this podcast. I want to test out a few segments with you guys and see if any of them stick or see if any of you guys really like it. So we're going to start out with today's hot take of the day, which I have decided is that college sports are not all that they're cracked up to be all of the time. So on this sheet of paper in front of me, I made myself a list of pros and cons of college sports when I was kind of mapping out this podcast and seeing how I wanted it to go. On the pros side, because I believe we should start with the good first. On the pros side, we have potential for free school, and in my experience, that was true. A sense of community, building friendships, building relationships that are going to last you for your entire life. Free stuff, which sounds silly, but that feels like a huge perk. Free clothes, free food. Depending on where you are, you can get a lot of free stuff. And I think that's kind of cool. And this one's kind of silly as well, but of course, just the title. I loved and still love being able to tell people that I was a college athlete or that I am a college athlete. And I think it looks good on job resumes as well, which is kind of silly, but it is what it is. So let's move over to the con side and get back to what I was saying with college sports are not all that they're cracked up to be. On my cons, I wrote, you have a limited social life. That can be a big thing to people. You can't participate in some of the things that you may want to participate in if you were not an athlete. No clubs, no social network outside of sports. And this is not always true. I had friends that didn't play sports, but it's just a lot harder to meet people and get to know people without that aspect of social life that you're missing out on as an athlete. There's also the con of the potential to have poor mental health. In my experience, before I started college sports, I was a very outgoing, chipper, positive person, which I still am today. But I had never experienced the whole depression or anxiety or things like that until I started playing college sports. And this was largely at the hands of the environment that I was in at the time and the coaches that I was surrounding myself with at the time. There's always the opportunity for that, and just navigating that feels like it kind of overshadows the pros that I mentioned earlier. Kind of going off that same vein, there's always the chance or the roll of the dice that you're going to get coaches that don't have your best interest or coaches that you don't always see eye to eye with, and navigating that can be extremely difficult. And I find that to be one of my biggest cons of playing college sports, and one of the main reasons that I say college sports aren't always what they're made out to be. The life is glamorous. I always looked at college athletes as the people that have it all. Like in high school, it's my only dream. I want to be a college athlete. I want to play at the highest level that I can play at and be the greatest that I can be. Until I set foot on campus and you just get hit with roadblocks and roadblocks and roadblocks, and you're getting punches thrown at you left and right that just kind of knock you down a few pegs. The life is not as glamorous as some people make it out to be. And then the last con that I had, which, you know, it's kind of subjective, but I just put general rigor, general difficulty, or when you look at the schedule of a college athlete, you're looking at 15 to 16 credit hours of school. And then on top of that, you've got 20-hour weeks of practice during the on season, as well as traveling at least every other weekend, where you could be missing, 2-3 days of school for a 4 or 5 day trip. It's a lot to balance. Balance is, or can feel, nearly impossible when you are playing college sports. It's not impossible, but it can feel like it at times. I mean, I'm still standing, so it can't be that hard. I'm not great at it, and I never was great at it, but it's something to keep in mind. All of this said, I'm talking about the hot take of, the life is glamorized. I don't want to push people away from being a college athlete. It's possible, but you need to make sure that this is 100% what you want to do, and also be willing to roll with the punches and accept that sometimes life isn't always going to be what you imagined it to be, and that's okay. It is making you a better person, and I truly believe that the experiences that I went through in college sports are what made me who I am today. Going through a difficult time in my life brought me to be just a completely different version of myself, and a version of myself that I am super proud of today. I am so much more outspoken, so much more positive and happy in my day-to-day life after the experience of college sports. However, I think there's better ways to go about it than what was my experience, which is going to bring us into our main segment today, or the second segment, and what this podcast is all about, today's silent sender. So, given that this is the first episode, I obviously do not have a silent sender today. Today's silent sender is going to be myself. And for my own silent sender, I wrote, "Your biggest enemy can sometimes be your coach." So, in my experience, let's just back it up a little bit. When I was being recruited in high school, I was being recruited by a coach that ended up no longer being at the university that I attended. So basically, I committed to a coach in April before I got to campus. The coach was let go by the university, and so I ended up playing for a different head coach than the head coach that I had agreed to. And over the course of my years there, other coaches got let go, and there were a lot of moving parts, and so I was just playing for people that I did not expect to play with. But in this vein of saying that your biggest enemy can sometimes be your coach, I've got a couple of stories that I just want to share with you guys about my experience and my coach. I think the best story, the number one story of all time at the school that I went to, was the infamous TikTok. So my sophomore year of college, I'm kind of laughing about it because I think it's funny now, but in the time it was not funny. My sophomore year of college, I was kind of just like floating through space. I was not a starter. I hardly ever played. And so at the time, my priorities were having a great time with my friends. So on Halloween of 2020, me and my friends had a little get together at another friend's house. There were maybe 8 or 9 of us there, but in the TikTok, there were like 6 or 7, I believe. And we filmed a TikTok that at this point in my life, I will admit was not the smartest choice to make at the time, but we make this TikTok. And it was not a great representation of who we were as people, but it was fun and it was a trend and all of this stuff. So we post it. It lives on the app for 2 months. I go home over winter break. And this is where things take a turn for the worse. We have a team meeting on Zoom, and afterwards, our coach asks for 5 of us to stay after the Zoom meeting to talk. When that happens, she screen shares her screen and plays this TikTok of us. And in that moment, I remember feeling fear and embarrassment and anger about the situation. And that skyrocketed my anxiety at the time. I think I lived with this like secret of knowing that she had that TikTok for weeks, months. I did not want to tell my parents about it because, you know, you don't want to get in trouble with your parents. That's just how it is. Anyways, back to the story. We get back from winter break. All of us know that she has seen this TikTok, and she told us in that meeting that we would discuss what would happen at a later time with that TikTok. But at this point, I had pretty much forgotten about it. It's pretty much a month later from when the TikTok was originally brought up, and we have our beginning of season meeting. So if you're not an athlete, basically at every semester you have a big beginning of the season meeting or beginning of the semester meeting where you just kind of talk about goals for the semester, goals for the season, all of this, how it's going to look, schedule, blah, blah, blah. So we had one of those meetings, and it was super normal until the very end. And I think we had been sitting here for like 2 or 3 hours by the time that we finally got to this. So my coach turns on the projector, and I bet you know where this is going, but she plays our TikTok in front of the entire team. That feeling was terrible. And me and my friends, I just remember like us going through the worst times ever when that happened. And looking back on it, I do understand that it was not probably a great thing for us to post that TikTok, but it happened. And when we were sitting in that room after that TikTok played, I remember getting called stupid. I remember getting called immature, and it was so insane. It was basically the roast of me and my friend group. We had never privately discussed what our consequences were going to be with the coach at the time. So it was a shock to me and all of my friends when we're sitting in this circle and our coach says, we are going to discuss suspensions. We are going to discuss loss of scholarship. We are going to discuss this, that, and the other. So I'm shocked, obviously. I am in so much fear, thinking that this is the end of my life. I'm going to have to drop out of college. I'm going to have to tell my parents that I got kicked out of school, all of this. That didn't happen. Probably a week after this meeting, our coach had us have a Zoom meeting with just the 5 of us again that were involved in this scandal, I guess you could say. And we got put on a 1-week suspension, and we were told that we would not be playing in the first 2 games of the year, which were in Louisville. And if you know anything about volleyball, Louisville is a powerhouse. So that was really cool. The suspension was kind of fake. So we were not allowed to practice, but we were allowed and told to go to lift and conditioning and that type of stuff. So we would go and lift and condition, and then we'd walk up to practice and just shag balls or stand there, and it was crazy. We were like shunned, and we were not in any media pictures. I remember our media girl like working around us to make sure that we don't get in a picture. It was just an insane time. So you would think the story ends there, and it does not. By the time we were coming around on our games that we were going to Louisville, we were running short on people on the team due to injury, due to people quitting, all of that stuff. So my coach calls us in, the 5, and she says that she's just so proud of how much we've grown and all of this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And we were told that we were going on the trip. We were going to go to the games and we were going to play, and that's that. I had told my parents like 2 days before this that I was not going to be traveling and that they weren't going to see me when they watched the game on TV, and I was like sobbing. This felt like some sort of mental torture to go through when we could have just been told probably more in advance that we were going to be going on this trip, and things may have been able to be resolved quicker. But I think that whole situation was handled so poorly. We were never given an opportunity to defend ourselves or have one-on-one conversations with our coach about what was going to happen before the coaches had told the team what was going to happen. And we were publicly humiliated for no reason. There was no reason to bring us into a room and play this video for everyone and scald us and all of that stuff. But it happened, and I truly do think that that experience shaped who I am today. That was some of the darkest times in my life, and I know for a fact that was a really rough time in some of my friends and roommates' lives. Shout out you guys if you're listening. But yeah, tough times for us. And the part that really got me the most, which I didn't mention earlier in the story, but I'll mention now, this video had not only been seen by the coaches, not only been seen by my teammates, but it had been sent to at least a few other people, because at one point our conditioning coach brought it up. So our coach was sharing this with God knows who. I believe at one point she said that it had been shared with administration and all of that. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now. So in the vein of keeping this episode short, I don't want to bore you guys with a ton of stuff, and I want to keep you guys excited for what's coming next. So I'm just going to cut off the episode here. I appreciate you guys so much for listening to this and just being so supportive of me in this journey. It really does mean a lot. I haven't tried to upload the podcast yet. Obviously, I'm recording it right now. But I believe that I'm going to be able to upload it on Spotify, YouTube, and potentially Apple Radio, Apple Music, whatever it's called now. I don't know. I use Spotify. So you can find me anywhere there. Also, you can find the podcast on TikTok and on Instagram. Our handle is at Silent Sender Pod. No spaces, no special characters or anything like that. Again, that is at Silent Sender Pod on TikTok and Instagram. And also, if you guys want to submit any stories, there is a link on the podcast Instagram, and I'm going to put a link to the form on all of the descriptions of the podcast. Or if you don't necessarily want to or need to remain anonymous, you can email us. The email is silentsenderpod@gmail.com. Again, that is silentsenderpod@gmail.com. I really appreciate you guys, and if you do want to send in a story, just be assured that it is going to be completely anonymous. There are optional questions on the form that ask if you want to leave an Instagram handle or a TikTok handle. Totally optional. Don't feel obligated to share that with me. I have already run a few tests with the form, and I can confirm it is 100% confidential. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening to the first episode of the podcast. I really can't wait to see where this is going, and I have just been really feeling the love and support from people in my life, complete strangers, all of that stuff. So stay tuned. I've already got the next episode coming for next week, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And remember to just follow us on TikTok and Instagram and submit your stories. Thanks again, and I hope you guys all have a blessed and wonderful day. Peace out.